It's time to set up our August TBR. My next couple months are going to be focused on trying to get through my physical TBR, which currently consists of 18 books. I'm not sure if I'm going to end up reading all of them. Maybe culling some of them will be another video, because my non-physical TBR list is pretty long and I'm pretty excited about some of the books that are on there. And I'm less excited about some of the books on my physical TBR, but we'll get into that. Hi, hello, welcome in. I'm Jerica, and I'm an editor, writer, and all-around content creator. We're going to talk about the books that I'm going to read in August, as well as a quick recap on the books that I read in July, which were all by Canadian authors. So during July, I read The Troop by Nick Cutter, Nostalgia by M.G. Vassanji, and since it's still July while I'm reading this, I've read and am reading short stories from Wilderness Tips by Margaret Atwood. So while I plan on doing full reviews of each of these books in one way, shape, or form, I'll talk a little bit about them. The Troop was the first one that I read this month, and it was really good to read a horror. I haven't read a horror in a while. Horror is kind of like my favorite media genre, whether it's video games, TV shows, movies, whatever. And I feel like I haven't read enough horror, so it was a good choice for me. The Troop is a horror novel about a small troop of scouts who go out to an island. They're already from an island. They're from PEI, but they go out to another island. They do this yearly. And then bad things happen. I don't want to give too much away, but someone else shows up on the island, and it's very bad that they've shown up. And I kind of want to leave it at that, because the description on the back doesn't totally give away what's going on, and so I don't want to either. And overall, I'd say it was a really good book. It was something that I had a really hard time putting down, and kind of my only qualm with it is something that is writing style related, and I feel like it's the smallest nitpick, but it was a continuous problem. I almost don't want to tell you in case it's not something that would stand out to you, so if you don't want to hear it, skip ahead I don't know, 20 seconds. I'll leave a timestamp or something. He's very descriptive in his writing, and one of the ways that he is descriptive is he uses a lot of similes, and some of these are bangers, while other ones, I'd almost, I want to call them trash, and I feel really bad about it. And I'll talk about it more in the full review of it, but that's really the only thing that I kept going, ugh, because I kept getting pulled out of it. And the worst part is that I was being pulled out of otherwise fantastic description and story. So I still will rate this quite high. I still recommend it as a book to read. Just if you can be pulled out of a story and it bothers you to be pulled out of a story by something like too many similes that aren't the best similes, I guess this one will bother you. So the next book that I read was Nostalgia by M.G. Vassanji. Again, another really good book. I do have a couple of kind of qualms with it. I'm going to remember to give you a description now of it. Basically, this is a speculative fiction, and it's dealing with immortality, but it's dealing with it in a very different way from the way that you would normally think of immortality, which is very interesting. Basically, the body can be rejuvenated, but every time that you rejuvenate a body, you have to implant new memories. And on the surface, that doesn't entirely make sense. And I'll talk about it more in the full review, because I don't want to get into it too much here. But that's basically what it's about. And then the nostalgia part of it is that through these fictions, old stories can leak through, and this is called, like, nostalgia syndrome. And our main character, Iggy, your head is probably blocking my full head right now. But our main character is a doctor who deals with kind of sealing up these leaks. So, like I said, I did really enjoy this book. It wasn't quite as unput-downable as The Troop, but I think that has something to do with the pacing of the book. This pacing is far slower than The Troop was. The Troop, I found, was really pulling me through, whereas this one was a bit more of a thinker, if you will. There was a lot more for me to try to read between the lines, whereas with The Troop, it was kind of just like the story was there. It wasn't really something that I needed to dig into, despite the fact that you can dig into anything you want. This one kind of like requires that digging in between the lines, thinking about like the themes of the book a bit more, and also with the speculative nature of it, trying to figure out what's actually going on. And that's something that I will get into more in the review, because that is part of like the qualms that I have with it, is that I feel like there was a little bit too much left for the reader to figure out, or maybe that's just me. But if you like a thinker, if you like something that you kind of have to figure out a little bit on your own, and you're also kind of looking for the foreshadowing of how it's going to end, and if you really like character growth, I suppose, that I found this to be very character driven. I feel like character driven, kind of slower paced books. Nostalgia is definitely something that you should look into. And then finally, like I said, it's still July, so I'm still technically reading this one, but I have finished one short story from it. I decided to read the title story, so I read Wilderness Tips. I just finished it last night. Based on that and the one short story that I had read before, I do think that these are going to be really interesting short stories. They do really look at kind of like the human condition and these moments where everything changes for someone. Wilderness Tips wasn't quite as shocking, perhaps is the right word. It wasn't quite as shocking as Hairball was. But it, again, like, I think everything in here is probably going to be very character-driven, just based on the kind of purpose of the collection. But well-written, and I think, as with a lot of, like, literary short stories, I think reading it, like, 2 and 3 times, I would get more and more out of it. I don't really have anything bad to say about it. It didn't, like, Wilderness Tips, the short story, didn't blow my mind or anything, but it was well written, and it kind of wound up in a similar place to where I thought it would, but still, I guess not as viscerally shocking, it was still kind of shocking. And so I hope that continues to be the way that the short stories go. Editor or just future Jerica may pop in here to talk about other short stories that I read from this. I assume I'll read 1, maybe 2 more, and then probably start my books from the August TBR. Hi, future Jerica, also outside Jerica. I already recorded this once, but my mic wasn't turned on, so hopefully I'll actually just be more succinct. I managed to read 5 short stories from this, 4 of them this month. As you know, I read Hairball previous to that. And I think I said in the original recording that I'd read Wilderness Tips, which is obviously the title short story, but it was definitely the most lackluster of all of the stories that I read. I was saying how Hairball was so shocking, and then Wilderness Tips really wasn't. Honestly, like, the rest of the stories I've read have been a bit more exciting, but I realized that kind of makes sense, because this is all about these catalytic moments in people's lives, and not every catalytic moment is going to be super exciting, and
furthermore, not every catalytic not every catalytic event is going to look exciting from the outside either. So I think examining those less exciting, less obvious catalytic events is really interesting too. It was just like a very stark difference between Hairball and then Wilderness Tips. So having read 3 more stories, it kind of like fills in the gap between those, I think. I don't think I even said in the previous recording, so I'll do better this time. I've read True Trash, The Bogman, and Death by Landscape since I last spoke to you. Something else that I found really interesting, and just like as the collection as a whole, even though I haven't finished it, I'm about like 60% through with these stories done. And I will come back to it, but obviously I'm reading a different short stories collection coming up in August. Something that I found really interesting is the span of like character identity and particularly age. I said I was going to fact check myself, so I'll fact check myself up here, but Wilderness Tips is definitely like at least middle-aged characters. I want to say older than that, but I think that kind of depends on definition of what middle-aged is, but I think they like mention the words middle-aged. And then in Death by Landscape, the character's technically like elderly, I think. I want to say like 70s or 60s. I think she says how old she is, but the catalytic moment that she's talking about happens when she's 8. And then in True Trash, the characters are 13-ish and then like 17-ish. Because there's kind of like 2 different age groups going on in that one. There's one more. I know there's Hairball, and I don't recall because it was a while that I read a while ago that I read it, but definitely like adults. Oh, and then the Bogman. There's technically like a middle-aged character, but our main character is like college-aged, so probably in her 20s. I think she says, and I think she does say she's in her 20s, but again, we'll fact check that. Something else, and perhaps this is why Wilderness Tips ended up being the title, because it kind of gives away this note. All of the stories, save for one I think so far, and maybe I could search for it in it, is they have to do with like the wilderness in some way, something like natural and untamed in some way, shape, or form. A lot of it has to do with like cabins and camping and day camps, or not like away camps, I guess, like summer camps. The only one that I think doesn't somehow fit into that like wildernessness is Hairball. I'm pretty sure that takes place all like in the suburbs kind of thing, like in the city, in the town. I could be wrong though. Maybe there is something. Or maybe it's wilderness is about how unhinged. Hopefully you can't hear my air conditioning right now. So the thing about Wilderness Tips being the title story is like, because it was like the most lackluster of all the stories, it kind of feels weird that it's the title story to me. Now obviously there are still, I think, like 5 stories that I've not read yet. And so like maybe that'll like bridge the gap between all of the stories, and also like maybe some more of them will be like a little less like intense. But then I was trying to like also equate the idea of like I didn't.
Hi, editing Jerica here. Apparently this recording was just never going to go well. My mic died, stopped working, and my phone doesn't just like pick up with my native mic when that happens, apparently. So I think I said some good things here, but I don't think it was like particularly important. I think I was kind of just musing about both reading the short stories in order and whether that like changes the experience, and also if authors and their editors If they always choose to do it in a certain order to provide a certain experience, or if sometimes it's not really about like reading in order. And then also I say that I wish that they would put some sort of like introduction in saying if like it's kind of like expected to read them in a certain order. And then I also talk about how artists, like music artists, Iggy, we really gonna do this right now? Music artists, like sometimes when you listen to like a music album start to finish, it like is like telling a story kind of thing. Like there's a greater story than like just the songs. Just like some short story collections, I'm sure, tell some sort of story, or like have like a progressive theme or something like that if you read from start to finish, whereas other collections are really just like collecting like stories. I think that's everything that I talked about, and then I did like a cute little like outro of like if you like, oh gosh, what did I say? If you're interested in examining those like catalytic events and how like one moment in someone's life can change their whole life, and kind of like seeing that, then you'll like the short stories in this. I think we'll leave it there, and I'll just let first recording Jericho pick it up. And speaking of August TBR, we're gonna jump into that, but really quickly, if you want to hear more, or if you want more Canadian author recommendations, check out last month's TBR. But August TBR, Iggy, my guy. So like I said, August and probably the next couple of months will be focused on getting rid of my physical TBR, both in culling and also just in reading some books. That doesn't mean that we won't see any new books added to the shelf or to my reading list. It just means that's kind of my focus. But I do want to talk about what's on my physical TBR a little bit before we get into the books that I've decided to put on August's list. My TBR is kind of filled with classics and required readings for when I was in university. And some of those I've read, some of them I haven't. The ones that I've read I don't remember very well, so they're kind of like rereads, but only kind of. And then there's a couple on there that were picked up either as gifts or by me from like secondhand shops, just as like oh, this might be interesting and I like books. And so like none of these are ones that were like, other than some of the classics, a lot of these aren't ones that were like, yes, I really want to read this. It's kind of just like, they've ended up in my collection. And so that's why I'm gonna be okay with DNFing or DNRRing, which is did not reread. And I'm okay with this. I mean, I'm always okay with DNFing a book. I just don't do it very much. I don't really have any reasons. I guess I just have luck. If the story starts to come back to me for those ones that I actually technically have read, I may DNF them, but not actually for the reasons of like not liking the book, but I might just like, I don't want to reread this, I would rather read a new book kind of thing. Not that I'm against rereads either. I've recently decided I'm definitely okay with rereads, despite being somebody who thought they would never reread books, but that's a whole other video, probably. So I will DNRR those. I won't mark them as DNF'd. I probably just won't put them down in my like story graph at all. I might put them as paused. I don't know what I'll do with them yet. However, even if it does start coming back to me but I'm enjoying the read, I'll still finish reading it. So I think that kind of explains what's on my TBR and where the next couple of months picks will be coming from. So without further ado, let's talk about what I actually will be reading during August. So the books that I'm definitely going to be reading in August are The Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera. And Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. And then if I get through those or end up DNFing or DNRRing, it's possible that I've read The Unbearable Lightness of Being before. The two that are kind of on my list are To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf, which I'm pretty sure I read most of, so this is definitely a possible reread, which also means possible DNRR. And the other is As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner. Again, I'm pretty sure I read this one while I was in school, and I just don't remember it particularly well. I have vague recollections of enjoying both of these books, which is part of the reason why I wanted to add them in as my kind of like backup books here. In addition, depending on how much is left in the month, kind of like I did with this month, I do have a short stories collection that I've not read every story of, so I might pad out my reading with short stories from Dubliners by James Joyce. That was another required reading. Obviously, we didn't read everything from it, and I have no idea what we did read from it. So that's going to be another one of those, oh, I've come across a story that I definitely read and may not reread. So let's talk a little bit about each of these books. The first two we're definitely going to spend a little bit more time with because they're the ones that I'm definitely going to read. Iggy, you're driving me absolutely nuts, buddy. I guess enjoy my cat for a lot of this video. So as with last month, I will read you the description of the book, which is not on the back of this one. It's on the inside. So for The Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera, it says, a young woman is in love with a successful surgeon, a man torn between his love for her and his uncorrigible womanizing. His mistress, a free-spirited artist, lives her life as a series of betrayals, while her other lover, earnest, faithful, and good, stands to lose everything because of his noble qualities. In a world where lives are shaped by irrevocable choices and fortuitous events, and everything occurs but once, existence seems to lose its substance, its weight. Hence we feel the unbearable lightness of being. A major achievement from one of the world's truly great writers, Milan Kundera's magnificent novel of passion and politics, infidelity and ideas, encompasses the extremes of comedy and tragedy, illuminating all aspects of human existence. So again, because this isn't on my, like, I really want to read this book list, I don't really have any preconceived notions. I don't have, like, a reason that I'm choosing to read it. And I don't know a lot about it. Again, despite the fact that I definitely had lectures on it, I just don't remember my university days very well. And so the reason that I'm reading it is because it was assigned reading. I have a physical copy of it, and I just want to try to get through my physical TBR, whether that is culling it or not. So we're gonna have to wait and see my thoughts on this after I've started reading it, because I have no thoughts, head empty. So the next definite read after I've decided whether I finish that one or not, which I'm sure I will. Like I said, I tend to not DNF books, not for not wanting to, I just usually seem to have a reason to keep reading. But for Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky, I will read you the description and then we'll talk about it, because this was not required reading, this was one that I picked up for myself. So it says, Raskolnikov is the pride and hope of his family, but he has broken off his studies and is living the life of a pauper in St. Petersburg. The only rational way out, it appears to him, is to murder Alyanova Ivanovna, I think. A disagreeable old pawnbroker whose existence he has decided is pointless. Conceived while Dostoevsky was a convict in Siberia and reflecting the painful process of his own reassessment of radical ideas, Crime and Punishment is a classic on a mighty scale, At once a thriller, a profound exploration of the psychology of a man who becomes a killer and has to live with his act, and a searching investigation of the social, political, and existential ideas of the Tsarist 1860s. So, obviously, this is like a really well-known classic, and there was a point in my life where I thought reading a bunch of really well-known classics was the way to go. And it's not because, like, I mean, part of it was pretension, but part of it was that I read a couple classics and I did actually just really enjoy reading classics. And so it's on there for a little bit of that pretension, as well as, like, I like classics, but something more specific to this classic that makes me want to read it is one of the books that I read in university that has actually stuck with me was by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I really enjoyed Notes from Underground. I will probably reread it sometime in the near future because it did, like, resonate with me so much. And I think, though, that it resonated with me because of the mental state that I was in. And so I'm very curious, A, if I will enjoy it as much now, and B, if it will resonate in the same or in a different way. But that's not on the TBR, that's not the book, just that's something that will definitely come up because I still have it. It's a very short read, and I do just want to know. But as for Crime and Punishment, the main reason that I still really want to read this one is because I did enjoy Fyodor Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground, and so I kind of just want to read more of his stuff. Some people, you know, like, pick an author and read, like, everything from them. I've not done that. I don't have an author that I've read all of their stuff, or even a lot of their stuff. The authors that I've read, like, many of their books, it's only been because I've read, like, one of their series. I think the only author that I've read books from two different series is Pierce Anthony, and I have not finished either one of those series. Although one of them I definitely want to, but I think I'll have to reread it. I like reread the ones that I've read, and it kind of ruins the experience, but that's a whole other thing. Jerga, don't get off topic here. But Crime and Punishment, just like reading the description, I think is also just like a really interesting, brain empty, no thoughts premise. It's an interesting premise. Just like thinking about the idea of like deciding to kill somebody and then having to live with that. I think that's an interesting, really. I think it's an interesting thing to explore from, like, the human condition, and if you know me, I just love human condition, which is part of the reason why I like zombie stuff so much, because it's not really about the zombies, it's about how humans react in it. And because a bunch of these books are from when I was in university, it might be pertinent to note that I went to university for psychology. So obviously kind of like how the human brain works and how people behave is something that I've been interested in for a really long time. So it makes sense that I'm interested in super character driven books that kind of explore how people react, especially how people react to traumatic situations. That's kind of like what I really like. Which is also probably why horror is like one of my favorite media genres, which I mentioned before. So those are the two books that I'm definitely going to read. Now, I don't want to spend too much time talking about the other two books that are possibilities, because they will probably only get read if I end up DNFing one of these. But I will read the descriptions for them. So, To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. To the Lighthouse is at once a vivid impressionist depiction of a family holiday and a meditation on a marriage, on parenthood and childhood, on grief, tyranny, and bitterness. As use of stream of consciousness, reminiscence, and shifting perspectives gives the novel an intimate, poetic essence, and at the time of publication in 1927, it represented an utter rejection of Victorian and Edwardian literary values. Virginia Woolf saw the novel as an elegy to her own parents, and in her diary she wrote, "I used to think of him, father, and mother daily, but writing The Lighthouse laid them in my mind." So this is one of the, like, I'm pretty sure I read all of this. I'm pretty sure I, like, wrote, like, papers and stuff on this one. Obviously, we read this one to examine stream of consciousness writing. Is that a bookmark? Okay, so maybe I only got to page 204. Also, I have had this bookmark for so long. This is a bookmark that I used, like, in middle school, I'm sure of it. That's crazy. Okay, I'm gonna put this back in here. I'm gonna read it with that in there. Oh my, there's another bookmark. Wait a second. Oh, this was from Octopus Books. Sweet. Okay, again? Oh, that's marking the end of the novel. Everything past that is notes and appendices. Okay, well that was a fun revelation. So that's one that, like I said, I'm pretty sure I read, maybe I only read to 204, I don't know, maybe I, like, just didn't finish it. But I'm interested in reading it anyhow. Stream of consciousness is something that, like, I find difficult to write, so I think it'll be interesting to read it, and maybe, like, examine it more from, like, a writer's perspective. The other one that is in the wings, if you will, is As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner. It says, As I Lay Dying is Faulkner's harrowing account of the Bundren family's odyssey across the Mississippi countryside to bury Addie, their wife and mother. Narrated in turn by each of the family members, including Addie herself, as well as others in the community, the novel ranges in mood from dark comedy to the deepest pathos. This one I find interesting, again, from a writer's perspective, because I think changing POV is really interesting, and I think how that's executed will help inform, actually, like, one of my works in progress right now, which is a linked stories thing, so not quite the same thing, but it will end up changing, like, character POV a lot between each of the stories rather than, like, between chapters of the same story. It's still oddly similar, I think. So again, from a writer's perspective, I'm kind of interested in reading this for that purpose. But again, I vaguely remember for both of these, I vaguely remember enjoying reading them and enjoying talking about them in the class that they were from, the same class that it was like English 101. Like it was like introduction to English in university. It was like from my first semester in university, both of these. So those are in the wings. Finally, it is more likely that I will read short stories from this than either of those books, but we'll see. So quickly, Dubliners by James Joyce. It says, with these 15 stories, James Joyce reinvented the art of fiction using a scrupulous deadpan realism to convey truths that were at once blasphemous and sacramental. Whether writing about the death of a fallen priest in The Sisters, the petty sexual and fiscal machinations of two gallants, or of the Christmas party at which an uprooted intellectual discovers just how little he really knows about his wife in The Dead, Joyce takes narrative places that it had never been before. So again, this kind of falls in a very similar place as Wilderness Tips. I do wonder if it will be as kind of shocking with like the last minute changes. So again, like, it's unsure if I'll read any of these, which ones I'll read. As with the short stories collection that was part of July's TBR, I'm kind of just like picking one. If there's one called Dubliners, I'll probably read it simply to read the title short story the same way that I did with this one. For fun, I'll tell you all the ones in it. There's The Sisters, An Encounter, Araby, Eveline, After the Race, Two Gallants, The Boarding House, A Little Cloud, Counterparts, Clay, A Painful Case, Ivy Day in the Committee Room, A Mother, Grace, and The Dead. So there isn't one called Dubliners. So it will just be me picking at random / whatever title calls to me. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say about the much larger but also more mutable TBR of August. Like I said before, I am really leaving room to DNF or DNRR. All of these books, all of them on my like my physical TBR, but definitely all of these have been on, I have been in my possession for like 9, 10, 12, 13, 14 years. I want to say 14 years for the like longest held one, which would be like As I Lay Dying into the Lighthouse. So it's really time that I read them or ditch them, I think. I am happy that I have such a small TBR. I recently watched another booktuber, Plant-Based Bride, go through her physical TBR, and it was over 100 books. Like, I felt like my 18 books was too many books to have not read, but to own. So I did feel a little bit better about that. I am somebody who, like, tends to just not buy myself stuff. So it's not really that surprising. But that's a lot of books to have and not read. So I'm gonna try to get through mine and then maybe do a bit of a book haul. I do have a very long list of books that I'd like to read. But I'd like to try to get as many of them secondhand as I can, so maybe there will be a searching for books at the local secondhand shops vlog. Was that a sentence that makes sense? I don't know. But I think my plan is to have made decisions about whether or not I'm going to read, whether or not I'm going to keep each of these books from my physical TBR by the end of December, so that in January I can kind of start fresh and start working through my like virtual or digital unowned TBR. Mostly because I think those are books that I'll be far more excited for. Despite wanting to read these, because they've been around, the, like, excitement for reading them isn't really there. I don't know if that makes sense. Hi. Clearly, it is time for me to be done rambling about these. So tell me what you're reading right now. Tell me what you plan to read in August. Make sure you subscribe, hit the bell, so that you can come back and hear my thoughts about the books that I did read, including the ones in July. We'll see how quickly I can pump out the videos. I definitely upload every 2 weeks. There's a possibility that you'll be getting weekly videos from me for the next little bit. We'll see how that schedule goes for me. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. We had fun. Catch you next time. Bye. Are The Unbearable Lightness of Being by... That's upside down. Sorry, just, yeah, making sure that my cat didn't stop my mic from working.